Hello, everybody. It's Martin Shillington. This is an interview with Richard Craig from the Technology Trust in the UK. So Richard is here because they've got a really integrated approach to a lot of tech. So I've got a whole list of the tech that they're using, and we're going to publish that alongside this video. He's in the office. He got a bit of background noise for the character of the show. And we're going to focus on him, put him on the main screen. Richard, welcome. You're CEO of the Technology Trust. Would you like to explain what the Technology Trust is and what you do there?
Thanks. Yeah, I'm the CEO of Technology Trust, and we've been around for almost 15 years now, helping charities on a range of digital and technology solutions. Probably best known for the TT Exchange donation program, where we're donating software to charities for a relatively low admin fees. I think we saved something like £170 million to date. Wow. And then beyond that, we're delivering mail solutions, foreign currency trading. So basically anything digital and technical that we think can help charities, social enterprises save money and be more effective, then that's the space we're in. Okay,
fantastic. Now, I don't want to call you a geek early on in the interview. However, I think we've kind of matched up. As soon as we're getting into the detail with certain stuff, it's like you use tech, you love tech, you know I love tech. So the fact is you've applied a lot of your interest, that's got that, into the Technology Trust itself. So it's not only that you're serving the charities, is that you yourself are applying the latest for you and your staff, yeah?
Yeah, I think it's fair, and I don't mind the word geek, actually.
I don't mind it either.
I think it is reflective of my personality type as much as the work one, I think. So I'm not technically trained, so I'm not an IT professional. And in fact, most people in the office here are not IT professionals, but we've got an interest in the application. So I think we look at it from a very people perspective. So most of the things we've done have been about making life easier. So,
yeah.
How's life going to be easier for me day to day? How's life easier at home? How's life easier on the commute? And that's been everything about flexibility, backing it up so I don't have to have stressful times when servers go down. So that's been the general approach. We haven't really looked at it from a cost point of view, but I'm pretty certain we've saved money. And I think if we did a proper cost analysis, which included our time and downtime and things around that, I'm sure we'd have got the benefit. But it's been an approach from uptime and a flexibility point of view, really.
Perfect. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just read out the preferred selection criteria that we've got. So people will have this. It will be linked in the video description. So this is how you chose, or the criteria that's sort of overarching for the choice of a lot of the kit. Is that reasonable?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. Preferred selection criteria: best of breed, great user experience, short learning curve, online training and support, cloud-based companion smartphone and tablet app, 30-day contract, open API, charity discounts, regular updates, zero setup, minimal configuration. So that's the sort of things that you're looking at. I think a lot of people are going to relate to that as general selection criteria.
Yeah, and I think we learned that as we went.
Yeah.
So, as we got to the bottom of the list to finish the process, we were getting much better at identifying the changes. And I think the first thing we did, if I remember correctly, was Microsoft Exchange, which was sat on a server, and Dropbox.
Yeah.
So we had a scenario where the only way to work away from the office was effectively remote desktop, which meant you needed an internet connection.
Yeah.
And two, I needed a PC at that point pretty much to do it properly.
Yeah.
And I'd come from an environment where I was pretty used to working anywhere in the world and being able to get access to files, which I think originally in other companies was a VPN. And that gave me access to servers, but that required Active Directory, and it gave me access to the Exchange server.
Yeah.
And we were relatively small, and it was probably when cloud was starting to gather some momentum. And I'd used Dropbox before, and I'd also used the Microsoft hosted Exchange, so the version prior to Office 365. So Dropbox was my first real jump at that implementation, and we had to negotiate hard in the office with people who were aligned to the older world.
Yeah.
So things like SharePoint, VPNs. People were concerned a little bit about security, bandwidth, the normal things about moving to the cloud.
Yeah.
Exchange was a slightly easier discussion because we had a real struggle keeping the server up. Power cuts in the office, disk failures, virus problems, antivirus updates, Microsoft updates. So the maintenance time required to keep the mail server running was quite extensive. So that was probably an easier bit. So the early moves were basically decisions made by a couple of people in the office just to improve our general stability. And we ran a hybrid environment with Dropbox for a while. So we continued to run the server, and we ran Dropbox from the server. So people in the office would still connect via a mapped drive. And then if you're out the office, you could connect via Dropbox. Had its own problems with it because it still made the server a weak link. So when the server was down, we didn't get Dropbox syncing. But it provided us with the first interim measures to start to switch some of the platforms to something which made it more flexible. So once we jumped off email on the server, and once we jumped off all of the files on a server, all of a sudden I was unleashed from being stuck, needing an internet connection to physically work. So that was kind of stage one, really.
And so I'm looking at the list. So Dropbox, are you still using Dropbox as the preferred route? Yeah,
we made a jump to Box in the interim. So Box is a partner on the donation program anyway, and we like the guys there, and they've got a good CSR program, and Box provides an almost enterprise level of control, and actually we jumped because of the control that we could do about who saw the files, how they were shared, edited them. The one challenge we had with that was that I'm a little bit of a control freak, and I never quite know what I want. So I effectively carry the entire server on my laptop all the time. And Box was not great at dealing with vast quantities of files. Right. So if you've got small projects, it was brilliant. It was a really good way to collaborate, especially externally, but it didn't lend itself to file syncing, and Dropbox have really got that nailed. So, we had issues with if you had large volumes of file on Box and we'd sync, it could take 20 minutes for the file to sync, which made working in the office really difficult on shared files. And it would kill your laptop while it was doing it. And I don't think that's really what Box is designed to do. So we have gone back to Dropbox. Dropbox has matured a little bit. They've improved their enterprise levels, and they've improved the amount of control, certainly not to the degree that Box can do, but for what we wanted for was simple file syncing across multiple devices in quite large sizes.
Yeah,
that was the tool that worked. And both of those platforms then talk to others, so they're very flexible. They can talk to Office 365, and they can talk to Salesforce. So, those things have really opened up as well.
Cool. Okay, so that's Dropbox. Let's jump back to Asana, which got us to the top of the list. What's it do? Task management and collaboration, but practically, what's that mean?
Yeah, so as an organization, and I think many organizations struggle with it, it's closing stuff out. So, we'll have multiple meetings, and then how do you ensure that people take the actions away and physically close them out?
Yeah.
Or we have a phone conversation, or we have an ad hoc meeting. And so Asana is a project management tool, but we use it really as a task management service. We've used multiple over the years. We've tried Outlook, we've tried Rike, we've tried multiple platforms, and we settled on Asana really because it generated the best user experience for us. Okay. So it's a really simple, beautifully designed mechanism that allows me to group projects into like groups or management meetings or technical meetings, and assign tasks to people with dates. They'll get a reminder. So it's kind of what the base levels of Outlook do, but with a lot more functionality and something which is much prettier to use. We've used Trello, which actually was really good. I mean, it's a developer tool but can be adapted for task management. And actually for smaller projects and single projects, we got really good engagement from everybody because it's a bit fun, it's a bit different. It's kind of like sticky notes on a board. But when we found we had multiple projects and people working across projects, it got a little bit harder for us to manage. We used Rike for a year when we were doing some proper projecting, so that has Gantt charts and some proper project management tools. And as we've moved away from that complex projects, it just became a little bit onerous to run. So I think Asana is the one we settled on, and we had a lot of people looking at this over 3 or 4 months, testing various platforms, and that's the one that gave us the best balance between kind of simplicity, design, and usability.
Okay, let's jump to Slack next, because I've got a question that relates probably to both. You're using Slack?
Yeah, so I think everybody's got a massive problem with email inbox.
Yeah.
So I must be getting anywhere between 30 and 70 emails a day, many of which require you to do something, many of which come from a person that sat next to me in the office. So, we've gone from a scenario where email, you were pleased to get an email and you maybe get a couple a day, and it was a real novelty, to kind of how can we manage that away. If we're honest, we initially went with Slack because it seemed cool. It's a software startup. Everybody's raving about it. It tends to be heavily used in the software development community. It's one of the 160 or so unicorn companies, and they're based out in San Francisco, quite close to where our TechSoup partners are based. So we had an affinity with it. We really like the interface. We like their kind of philosophy. They've got a not-for-profit program as well, so which always endears us to want to use it.
Yeah.
And they were heavily focused on some of the things we really liked, which was, it works on an app. There's a free solution there. You can upgrade if you want to, and they're just a real attention to detail and user journey, which you don't kind of get everywhere. Yeah. I think there's probably a split between those who really like it and those who don't quite get it, and I think it's maybe an age thing. So we almost think that Slack's a bit like Twitter, and some of the other tools like Yammer are a bit more like Facebook. So we're finding the older people in the office want threaded conversations, which is kind of where Yammer sits. And the younger generation who are more Twitter and hashtag oriented think Slack's the best thing ever. Yeah. So we're using it to a degree to do internal comms, so internal chat. I think it's in its current form, it's very much a live chat tool, a bit like Twitter. I think at some point this year, they're actually going to provide threaded comms. And I think what that will then do, it would unleash a possibility for us to turn off Outlook internally and use it rather than the tool of serendipity, where you kind of stumble on interesting stuff, to one which will allow us to properly use it as an internal and external comms tool. Yeah. So that's the vision, is turn Outlook off internally. And I think 365 allows us to do that. So if we want to talk to somebody in-house, we want to try and do that through Slack. And I think it'll improve the engagement and communication that we can do.
Great. I love it. I use it on lots of projects now. But at the same time, exactly what you say, it's the threaded, non-threaded thing. It's a bit like a fire hose sometimes, and it's hard to keep track, which ties into the Asana point. So there's a question for you. How do you know what tool to use?
That's a really difficult one. So, we obviously set the criteria, which filters the list down. We'd normally do our research on, so we'd go to places like G2 Crowd, PC World, The Verge, kind of a lot of the blogging type sites, which would normally give us a short list. We normally have a list of requirements, so we'd say, what are the things this thing has to do? Yeah. And then we'd pick 4 or 5 platforms. We'd normally either get demo accounts, trial accounts, and we'd have a play with them. Yeah. And then in some cases, we'd actually hand it across to the workforce. So particularly when it came to things like task management, which seems to be one of the most personal things. There's a lot of people still want to use pen and paper, which, is fine. So, when it came to making people switch from their most comfortable task management tool, that's one of the ones where we just handed it out to everybody and said, look, here's 5 platforms, here's 5 accounts. Log in, have a play, tell us which are the ones you think you would use every day. Yeah. And that's how we arrived at Trello. Asana was a little more contrived, because actually we probably had a tighter list, but we didn't involve the whole workforce for that one, but we did involve a subset of people to pick them out. I think task management probably took way more time than anything else to get right. Yeah. I think it's still one of the areas where it's so personal, it's quite difficult to pick the platform of choice. So certainly, go and do some research, see what the other bloggers are saying, look at the reviews. Some of the sites like G2 Crowd are pretty good, and they'll give you comparing platforms, and then go away and test them and find the one that fits the best.
Good stuff. We're going to come to the next level down from that, which is in a second. Tasks. How do you know which tool to use for a task? But we'll come to that in a little minute. Let's tick a few of these off. TT Mail.
That's our own mail solution. So it's a white label .mailer platform. Yeah. So the go-to solution in the marketplace is MailChimp. Yep. And I think .mailer's solution, which we white label and sell to charities, is probably similar in concept, but has got some feature improvements. So I think broadly it's similar on cost. I think they've probably done a better job of automation. They've done a better job of template building, but they're very similar. So, we've been offering that as a solution to charities for, I think, 7 or 8 years now.
So this is email automation. So this is follow-up process, potentially, after somebody's opted into something, showing interest, etc.
Yeah, I mean, this is the next evolution of mail. In itself, most of the platforms are moving this direction. So, 3 or 4 years ago, you could get things like hotspot tracking, open rates.
Yeah.
But what you want to be able to do now is to almost set a campaign and let the campaign run itself. So MailChimp's capable of doing this to a degree, and then you get some of the kind of the enterprise level platforms who've been doing it for 3 or 4 years, and it's now starting to filter down.
Yeah, Infusionsoft, HubSpot, those are the ones that I tend to be using.
Yeah, I mean, we were HubSpot users for a couple of years because we couldn't get functionality from the other platforms, and there's .mail has matured their platform, and ultimately our TTMail solutions matured in the same way. We've been able to replicate that same level of automation that HubSpot did and bring it back into the mail solution, and it's way cheaper than HubSpot. Yeah. So it's very much an internal tool, but one we sell externally.
Interesting.
But realistically, your best alternative to that solution is probably MailChimp. And both platforms seem to change monthly at the moment in terms of feature sets and the way they work.
Cool. Sounds great. Okay, next one. Let's jump back. Evernote. I know Evernote. I haven't used it for a while, but I know it's a good solid solution for. Yeah,
this was so taking minutes, taking notes. We wanted a shared mechanism so that we could actually push them around the office. So Evernote's another provider, do fairly extensive charitable discounts. Platform agnostic. There's an app, you can take them offline. Yeah. So a lot of the boxes that kind of tick for Dropbox and they also tick for Evernote. The engagement's been reasonable on it. I use it a lot externally with partners, more than we do internally, particularly since Asana has become a place we do tasks. So we probably realized quite early on that actually recording the actual tasks was way more important than recording the minutes. So quite often in a meeting now, we'll aim to try and record the tasks live in Asana. I tend to use Evernote externally, where we've got notes and documents to share with partners. And I think Evernote, somebody once said to me, Evernote's one of those platforms is you'll never really get it unless you completely, that's the only place you go.
Yeah.
So the minute you do your shopping list, the minute you do your tasks and all of those things, that's when Evernote makes sense. And we never quite took the full plunge, I think, to make it our single domain. So we are still using it, but not to the extent that I think it's probably capable of.
Okay, so that throws up this question. I've got the next question along, which is internally, how do you know, what's the criteria, or rather, how do you set the criteria for which tool to use when? Because there's a little overlap potentially between Asana, between Slack, between Evernote, between potentially other things as well, or has it become clear and obvious?
No, and I think it's an evolution. Yeah. So one of the other things we're either good or bad at, depending on your perspective, is we switch platforms.
Yeah.
So, the idea of taking a 30-day contract and making it easy to import and export and having an API and platforms that talk to each other is, all of a sudden Asana doesn't become the class leader, is we export all the tasks from Asana and push them into the new one. So there definitely is overlap. And that's when it becomes really good, when the platforms talk to each other.
Yeah.
Because the overlap becomes less important, and increasingly as we have better APIs and tools like Zapier.
I was going to just say, it's not on the list, and yet actually that's the one that connects so often.
But probably, and actually I think if I was generating a list today, Zapier is one that we're using increasingly, particularly for getting things in and out of Salesforce. And so Zapier is a great tool, and their interface and their experience makes it really easy for non-techies to do some interesting stuff.
They're a great bunch of people as well. They've done really well. I know the community team.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a bit geeky at home as well, so I have been like a Nest thermostat and connected Hue lights, and so you can do funky stuff like when the temperature drops, change the color of the light bulbs, and somebody knocks on the door and the lights change. So it's very clever stuff.
Yeah.
So certainly Zapier is on the list. I mean, there are many alternatives to it, but I think Zapier is the one that's probably the easiest for us to function with.
Yeah.
But many other platforms will have an API, an open API built in anyway.
Yeah. So
we would use, say, Xero for accounting.
Yeah.
And then Expensify talks to it, and Receipt Bank talks to it. And so we've genuinely also looked for open platforms.
Yeah.
It's great that Microsoft are finally getting on board with that as well, in the way that Google did 4 or 5 years ago. So it was always really frustrating to be using Office 365 and not actually allow it to talk to anything else.
Yeah.
And they're getting really good at opening their world up as well. So all of a sudden I can plug Dropbox into it. And so it's becoming less important, I think, which tool you pick rather than picking one that's open.
Yeah. So, Go on.
So, so when we talk about the task management stuff, and we've got people with so many personal preferences, I guess the ultimate goal is to get to the point is we don't really care which one you use, as long as they can all talk to each other and actually we can share them. And I think that's probably, how we're going to go. A lot more choice. I mean, we don't predicate to people you've got to use a Mac or you've got to use a PC. We haven't had anybody come for some time and said they wanted to use Linux, but if they did, we'd let them.
Yeah.
And I think the same thing for software. If we don't want to use Microsoft Office, then use Google, and actually they can talk to each other, and it really doesn't matter to us. And that makes life much easier.
It's a different view, Richard. This is the thing. You know what I mean? It's you've got this connected view, and because of the criteria you set, a lot of people would say no. You turn up at an office, and you are going to be using Office 365. You are going to be. You know what I mean? I think that this is a This is a. It's almost a technological development stage. In my opinion, is you're allowing people to be free to provide things that are connected. Is that reasonable?
Yeah, I think so. And it's probably a reflection of the way we behave at home as well.
Yeah.
So I genuinely believe this is the way software is going to mature. It's interesting, looking at the change in banking this week, is that they're basically going to force the banks to open up their entire banking system so you can pick whichever app you want to manage your bank account.
Yeah.
So that's that's kind of the direction of travel. Yeah. And then what we'll find is there will be people will have personal preference, so everybody's going to manage their bank accounts with a different platform, and clearly it will engender a level of competition around the specific skill set. So it's one of the challenges I think Office has is Outlook's still kind of the class leading email tool, but actually within that, task management's not great and calendar management's kind of average. So what you want to be able to do is to be able to have task management managed somewhere else. So I think that's my view on the world, is an interconnected world of things that talk to each other, and you'll use personal preference to decide which things work for you to deliver your outputs.
Perfect. Let me quick fire some questions at you around these because I want to find the benefits. Xero, so Xero. I know it's really popular. What have you found that's good about it? This is for accounting.
Well, one, I'm not an accountant, and I can completely follow it and understand it and mature it and develop it. So so for a non-accountant, it's a really good tool. It's beautifully simple. It's well designed. Seems to do everything you'd want from a UK accounting platform, and I think it starts at £9 a month.
Yeah, right.
For a cloud-based accounting system, and the same ecosystem of apps, things that plug into it. So there's QuickBooks as an alternative, and I think Sage Cloud, but Xero seems to be the one. It's the one fitted best for us because of the ecosystem. Yeah. And we've got several converts, including new accountants and people internally who can all use it. We could never engage with our old accounting system unless you're a qualified accountant, and this is entirely different.
Right. Salesforce.
Yeah, I mean, where else do you go for CRM these days? So they're fantastically generous as a foundation. So your first 10 licenses are free, right? And everything after that is discounted. They never can quite agree what the number is, but it's somewhere between 75 and 85%. So it's really cheap for charities for licensing. Its pros and cons basically is it's a blank canvas. So it's a vanilla client that you basically tailor to do whatever you would like it to do. Yeah. And that means you can effectively build a really, really engaging platform that delivers all the bits you want to. The downside is that you've got to find a really good consultant to do that, and ideally not a technical one. I still view Salesforce implementations, like many, as a people-based project. So if you had a 5-week project, probably 1 week is build and 5 weeks sitting with people. Yeah. So trying to find people to do that and trying to find it economically for charities can be a bit of a challenge. But same thing, a massive app store. A lot of our platforms just have off-the-shelf apps that allow us to plug in. Yeah. And an API that's there if you're slightly more technical and want to build your own mechanism to get data in and out. I suspect when Salesforce started, people were not quite working out why on earth did you want to put any of this in a web browser. And clearly now you see the real benefit of doing that. Yeah. So we're massive advocates of Salesforce. Yeah. And the foundation itself because of that. Okay.
Expensify.
Oh, expense is the bane of my life. One, doing my own, and 2, signing off everybody else's. Yeah. So I'd rock into the office. Well, I go to the office every day, but once a week we sit down with the accountant, and I'd get a big pile of receipts to go through. All the forms would be different. All the receipts, some would come in a bag, some would come out of date order. Yeah. So trying to rationalize that and trying to sign expenses off in a diligent way was actually massively time consuming. Then they'd disappear off to the accountants in an envelope, and somebody would manually type those into the accounting system.
Yeah.
The receipts would go into a box, and if we ever got audited, somebody had to find the receipts. So we basically went with the quest of saying there's got to be a better way to do expenses. And we initially looked at building our own in SharePoint, and then we dipped into the market and looked at 5 solutions that were built off the shelf. And Expensify was still probably early stage development, so wasn't perfect as a solution, but was the closest fit.
Yeah.
So, if you're fortunate enough to have a good bank and a good credit card system, the principle is that credit card statements are automatically fed into somebody's account. Photographs are taken of the receipts. Receipts are scanned, OCRs done on them, and they're paired to the credit card statement. They're submitted digitally to somebody who approves it, and then they go to the accountants, and everything's done digitally. And there's an app with it, and there's an ecosystem of apps. And then for us, that talks to Xero. So instead of the accountant having to manually retype all of that data in, we actually do it at source. So when you fill in your expense form, like you'll say this is travel, this is entertainment, and it'll go to the correct company and the correct space in accounting.
I see. That's what it's about.
Yeah, and you can even automate it to pay people. So, I mean, if we wanted to, we could set up the company PayPal account. And the minute I've approved it, people get paid without having to go through the banks.
See, this is end to end, isn't it? I mean, this is what it's about. This is why I want to interview you, so people can. You've got to see what you're trying to achieve, which is remove all of the hassles that we've got using tech.
And to a degree, some of the things we implement, it's almost fun. So expenses isn't quite the chore it used to be.
Yeah, yeah.
And who would ever thought accounting was interesting? Xero has almost changed my view of how interesting it is to be an accountant, because it's no longer number crunching. It's beautiful reports, it's outputs, it's the better end of it. Yeah. So yeah, Expensify has been great, and it's the I wouldn't switch from it.
People HR.
Holiday tracking was the prime driver for this. So who's in the office on what day, who's off sick, and what do we do about tracking and booking holidays? So we used Who's Off for 12 months, 18 months. I think they're based down in Canterbury, and they were kind of the only place we could find to do that. And then as we matured our thinking on HR and professionalized a bit, we thought, well, actually, maybe we should start to think about trying to get more of that information up into a platform.
Right.
We looked at a lot of US companies, and I think People HR is UK based. So it does all the same stuff on holiday tracking and sickness tracking, but allows us to store all of the HR data up there as well. So kind of personal data, salary stuff, letters. It's maturing into an appraisal type platform as well. So it gave us one mechanism to store all of the HR type information, which we can share with different people internally and share externally as well.
Yeah. Jumping back, probably Receipt Bank relates to Expensify and to Xero.
Yeah. So the process for invoices before was they would come into the office. They'd come into either into our office or to our accountant. Somebody would collate them together, or somebody who wants to sign off every invoice. So they would scan them and send them to me. I would sign them off. Old school was I'd sign them off on paper, but new school was I'd get a PDF and I'd sign them off using a digital pen on an iPad.
Yeah.
I'd PDF them back into Dropbox, and the accountants would then pull those out and enter all of that data back into the accounting platform. So a lot of movement of information and data. We came across 4 or 5 companies who could do scanning work. But only 2 or 3 of them who were directly kind of integrating into Xero. And Receipt Bank was one who had a great user interface, had a lot of great reviews. And the process there is we either receive an email directly digitally into a specific email address, we scan it and send it to a specific email address, or it gets posted to us and we then scan it in. So whichever way, you end up with a PDF, either direct from client or from us. The invoices are scanned, so the character recognition scanned, and then it pairs that data to Xero. So it extracts the chart of accounts in from Xero. When the receipts or invoices come in, they're automatically paired into Xero and sucked in. Okay. So we've got to the point now where we've automated all of that process through the platform. Actually, the account from invoice being sent to this digital email address, they actually end up in Xero with no intervention in between. And the accountants just go and validate them as a draft invoice in Xero? Has it got the correct account code in? Does it look right? Are the numbers right? And then it just goes through the normal payment process. So this is one of the areas where we were paying the external accounting groups quite a lot of money to do that annual processing of invoices. So we've saved thousands a year in processing costs. And all of a sudden, I've got a platform that actually keeps a record of all of my historic invoices. But then we'll bring all of that same data into Xero. So we have scanned copies of every invoice in Xero through that platform as well, which just makes life a whole lot easier from an audit and tracking point of view. So, we didn't aim for this one to save us money. This was designed to make life a lot easier and increase the amount of data that we could report. And this one's really great. And what it costs us $15 an organization a month, something like that. It's not a huge. We're finding many of these tools. Independently, things like Expensify, People HR. You're all, for an organization of 15 people. You're looking at, the order of £20-25 a month to run them. So cumulatively for everything we do, including Dropbox, it's £200-300 a month. Which is
and business automation is what it becomes about. And that's the piece that you're saying. It's like it's task automation that ultimately this is where businesses are not necessarily seeing the advantage. This is people's roles, isn't it? It's actually that you can focus on the other stuff. They can focus on the non-moving of the paper around. So like the audit, and they can be checking. They can do high level tasks. That's the point.
Yeah, and depending on the nature of role, I'm essentially paperless. I carry everything with me, and I've always got access to it. And the accounting team is slightly less so because they're just the nature of the role, but. We've got to the point where we don't physically need an office. We have one because we like it. We've got to a point where, backup is not something we have to worry about. So backup of data, loss of information, was always a stress point before. So that's kind of taken care of. Disaster recovery. It used to be a fairly extensive document. Now it's we'll just go home and start working from home or anywhere where I've got an internet connection. So, that takes away a lot of the stress of, the day-to-day bits. As you say, we can concentrate more on actually doing great work for charities and improving our performance.
Cool. Last couple of bits, two different phases: VIA hosted phones, and then Microsoft Office, and then we'll come to then we got Click, and then we got two Google ones. VIA hosted phones. What's that?
So Skype for Business, which used to be Link, has been around for quite some time, and it's kind of a bit like Google Hangouts, but without a phone number. So what people like VIA do is they basically connect your version of Skype for Business to a PSTN exchange and allow you to have phone numbers. So all of a sudden, our virtual system for video calls like Google Hangouts had a phone number attached to everybody's accounts.
So I'm going to be really dumb here. So basically, if it was you've got a phone number, I could phone you on my mobile phone and it would call you on your Skype, would it?
Yes. Yeah.
Fine. Okay.
So, Skype Personal's been doing it for some time. So you could buy a phone number in. Skype for Business doesn't yet allow you to buy those numbers direct from Microsoft, but many companies want to have if you want to have your existing phone numbers ported or you want to have a range of numbers. I suspect at some point Microsoft will allow you to purchase a bank of numbers directly from them and they'll host them. But in the short term, you need an intermediate to connect Skype for Business to the real telephone world. And what that allowed us to do was to rip out a Cisco-based phone system, which is perfectly functional and really good, but actually quite heavyweight for what we needed. And replace it with something which allows me to take a work-based phone call on a laptop, an iPad, a mobile phone, and allow us to route those calls through to Salesforce and to third-party platforms as well.
Oh, wow.
So, when we prepped all of this before we moved to our current offices. So all we needed when we moved in on the day was an internet connection and a single fixed IP address to reroute everything through. So no phone systems to plug in, no servers, none of those things. And we've got a flexible working environment. So 1 or 2 days a week, people work from home. We've got one of our employees who's currently working from Spain. And by putting everything into the cloud, including the telephony system and having them all linked to each other, it gave us a degree of flexibility about when we work and how we work. And I think it's cheaper than the phone lines that we could take from BT.
Yeah.
And it's probably broadly the same cost as the Cisco system. But for us, it's easier to manage. So, I think Cisco's great, and their technology is really world class. But we couldn't manage it ourselves. We needed an external group of consultants to do that. And the Via system is much more manageable, that we can run that ourselves.
Cool. Why Microsoft Office 365?
We probably alluded to this earlier. The primary driver was to get Exchange off the server. So Office 365 for businesses comes with an Exchange account as well. So all of our email management is now done from the cloud. Peripheral benefits really have come from software management, software distribution. So, I rebuilt the Mac. We're having this conversation on over the weekend. And the role of getting a copy of Office back onto the PC used to be a system administrator job, and there'd be license keys and there'd be volume licensing center. Microsoft have made it to the point where effectively, I can set that account back up myself, download the latest version of the software from Office 365. So it's much easier to manage. Gives me a web portal where I can get in to access my emails as well, and ensures that we've got a robust and stable email server.
Yeah.
So, okay. I mean, there are pros and cons to this versus, Google.
So let's have that. Why not? Why not apps for work then?
I think when we first made the jump, to work offline, we still needed to have copies of Office installed anyway.
Yeah.
So working offline has always been a big thing for me.
Yeah.
So I kind of don't want to be restricted about how and when I work.
Yeah.
I think that the feature sets in Office is way more extensive than Google. But I'm probably one of the few who uses those extensive features. I think for the vast majority of people, Google Apps will cover everything they would ever want it to do. But as soon as you get into sophisticated spreadsheeting and I think you need something slightly more powerful. So that's a very personal choice.
Yeah.
At the time we weren't partnering with Google, so we were only partnering with Microsoft. So there was very much a view that we should be adopting the tools of a key strategic partner. But we do have Google accounts. We do use it for projects, particularly collaboration. So I think for a good while, Google's really big selling point was being able to work on the same document at the same time and do collaborative working. And I think eventually Microsoft have caught up to that, to the same point. So I think some of it's philosophical, which platforms you like to work with, kind of the really cut back, bed down, simple to use Google version. Microsoft's more complex, but more functional. And I think, like many of these things, it's a bit like the Mac versus Windows discussion, which is better. The answer is neither. It's personal preference and what works for you.
Yeah.
And, with tools like Zapier, and you can actually, we can give people the choice to use Google Apps or Office 365.
Yeah.
And we do, we'll pick apps for certain projects and certain things we want to do. But the majority of the time Office. And I think Office is very entrenched in the UK as well. People who are incredibly comfortable with it. If I look at, places like the US, there's a much stronger adoption of Google than the Microsoft project. So it's very much a personal preference one. My personal preference is I think kind of the Office apps still provide the best experience for the majority of the work, but some of it we'll do inside the Google app environment. And then we'll go to visit some of our other TechSoup partners, or we'll visit other partners externally, and some people are completely the other side of the fence. They only do Google. Yeah. It's becoming less important. The platforms learn to talk, really. And both of those platforms, there's not-for-profit programs as well. So from a charity perspective, you can get them at zero, stroke incredibly low cost, depending on what solution routes you want to take.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, last three. So we're going to go Google AdWords, Google Analytics, and Click.
So Google AdWords Analytics is a free tool. And whilst it's not the de facto to cover absolutely every element you need to understand about your web traffic, it's the best place to start, I think. So, if you're not using kind of Google Analytics and Google AdWords, whether we tell every charity to get on it. So Google Analytics will give people understanding of the traffic to their website, and it's pretty sophisticated. What operating systems are you using? Whereabouts in the country are they? Which country are they in? Which are their favorite web pages? How long do they stay on? So, if nobody's getting that level of traffic, then that's the first thing you do is get analytics on. It's a pretty easy to understand tool and pretty easy to implement. So Google AdWords is kind of is pay-per-click, and if people aren't familiar with that, it's effectively the adverts you get when you do a search on a web page. So there's an AdWords grant for charities of $10,000 a month, which eligible UK charities can subscribe to, and that allows them to bid. I think it's up to $1. I think is the current guidelines for UK charities to effectively put an advert up about raising funds, a particular event they want to process. So if somebody's Googling that or something similar, they'll get it placed up in the process. So again, the AdWords application that Google does, so they're not-for-profit AdWords grant of $10,000, we would, again, it's a no-brainer for charities to run. We've on and off in-house and out-housed our AdWords accounts. So there are some restrictions. The $1 restriction can mean you've got to be a bit creative around how you use it. There's an express version of AdWords, which makes it a little bit easier for people to get their heads around, but there is a little bit of skill to making that process work. So, analytics will tell you about the traffic to your site. AdWords will get people to come to the site in the first place, and both of those are effectively free or extremely low-cost tools for charities.
Yeah. Great. Click.
This is a fairly sophisticated analytics tool. Yeah. So in a previous life, we used to build analytics tools, and they were a behemoth 3-server configuration and nightly backups and SQL running multiple pass-throughs to get all the data out. Getting a good understanding of large volumes of data in pretty ways was actually a fairly meaty task. And as server power's moved and the clouds come along, all of a sudden you can get your cloud servers to basically process a lot of data. So Click was donated to us by the Click. I think they have a foundation. It's a fairly expensive piece of software, but there are alternatives like Tableau, which are on the donation program, and a couple of others. Okay. And it allows us to take large volumes of data. So for us, we're taking transactional data on the donation program, so hundreds of thousands of rows of data, and allows us to report and segment it in several different ways. So we might want to run a report which gives us monthly income by charities under £10,000 who only bought Microsoft Office in month 3, but then bought another piece of software in month 5. So it allows you to ask fairly complex questions, but get the data presented back in fairly simple ways. So we've been increasingly using that to drive a lot of our dashboards, a lot of our fairly complex reporting, I think. Yeah. We do some of it in Salesforce, but increasingly we're exporting the Salesforce data into Click and then using Click to do it. And then we can share some of those dashboards externally with the trustees, some of them used internally. It's probably the first place I start when I come into the office in the morning now. So we have a master dashboard that explains how we performed yesterday. Wow. So, how many donations did we give to UK charities? Which charities took the largest volumes of software? How many mail support calls did we take through? What was the average call time? So you can build it, to drive some fairly sophisticated outputs, and then they obviously change behavior. So they allow us to put KPIs in, and they allow us to look at changing the processes.
And is that your dashboard? That's what you use for your dashboard? Or
it's becoming our dashboard. So it's predominantly for the donation program at the moment. We're using it for some financial processing that we do as well. We're about to bring our all of the mail data across. We get, pretty much every mail that's sent out by UK charities got some stats associated with it that we can share with the charities. So we can bring all of that data in on usage rates, open rates, click rates, which will give some interesting analytic stuff as well. So it's not the easiest of tools to implement. It's a little bit like Salesforce. You need a little bit of technical help to get it built. Yeah. But once it's up and running, it's a tool you can manage yourself. It looks very much like Excel with a lot more filtering on it. Tables that produce charts. With some fairly complex equations in between to make things look the way you want them to. So it's not a tool for novices, but for people who have a little bit of a analytical mind and are good at kind of Excel kind of equations and macros, it's a really good way to build some scalable tools for large volumes of data.
Awesome. Now, just if you're watching this, click's got a Q and then lik.com, I believe. Let's just double check. Yeah, it is.
It is, yeah.
Yeah. So if you're watching this and you want this list, it's either in the description or it's on the web page where you're watching it. So you've got all of got access to the download that Richard's put together, which is the operating platforms. Got one more question for you, Richard. Okta. OCTA, we had at the top.com. That's your unified login and management. That's the last one.
Could be a typo on my list. I think it's OKTA, I think.
Oh, that's it. OKTA.
Yeah. So as we've jumped to the cloud, one of the questions we get asked a lot is how on earth do people cope with multiple passwords for multiple platforms? And, you know, depending on the browser you use, some of them will store them if you're comfortable to do that. Some of them will you don't necessarily want to have all your company passwords stored in a browser environment. And then the next challenge we've got is we bring a new employee in, we've got to onboard them onto 15, 20 platforms and set security rights.
Yeah.
What Okta does is they've built a really clever system whereby you can provision and manage employees and their passwords from a single platform. So we would go to Okta and say, actually, a new person's joined today. I'd like you to give them access to Salesforce, Office 365, Expensify. And this is their email address, and this is their user rights, depending on which platforms come into it. And then it can automatically go out and provision that user. And then what they get is an app on a web page where they can basically get a list of all the platforms we've got in the company. They set one password up for Okta, and then it will then give them access to all of the platforms that sit in it. So they would just go to a web page which has got Salesforce on it, click on the Salesforce link, put their Okta password in, and it will then log them into Salesforce. So it's a single sign-on system with provisioning depending on the platform that allows us to manage a cloud-based environment in a way that you might have used Active Directory to manage access to the Microsoft network and the Microsoft solutions. We're using Okta to manage a cloud-based version.
I love this. So that hopefully everybody watching it, you'll now understand why I wanted to interview Richard. That is a complete view of how they're connecting things. There may be other pieces that Rich hasn't said, but in terms of the breadth that we've covered from CRM to the accounting systems to storage, Richard, that's awesome. Really, really cool, and hopefully very useful for people, both in the charity sector, but also generally as to what you can do when you've got that view.
Yeah, I think probably the last thing to say is, people talk about digital transformation. And I think we've done more of a digital transition. So this wasn't a 2-minute journey.
Yeah.
It was, we made lots of mistakes on the way and learned a lot through the process. So it was probably a good 2.5 years to kind of make the transition from, almost being server reliant to kind of having this open world of apps.
Yeah.
And I guess it's not transformation because we haven't finished. So, we're continually reviewing what platforms and services we want to use and what else comes to market. There's a whole bunch of marketing platforms which aren't even on the list, things for creating landing pages and things for doing hotspot recognition. And, there's a whole nother sheet just of tools that we use to do clever stuff around the website.
Well, we get you back on that one.
Yeah, maybe I should get Matt to come and sit with me because he's the expert on this. But yeah, some of those have really changed the way we think about website building and the messages we want to put out as well.
Well, if you'd be happy, I'd love that.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Where can everyone find you, particularly if they're a charity and they don't know if the Technology Trust is UK based?
Yeah, I mean, we're London based. If you want to go to the website, www.technology-trust.org. Then on any of the products and programs and services that we do, we'll jump off from there.
Absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much. That was actually great. I really enjoyed that. If you check the description, just to say, check the link in the description. You're going to have access to the PDF. I'm just going to have it in Drive. And also on the website, go and check them out and see which ones you can be using. I'm going to go and check Expensify because I can't stand them like Expensify. So I'm going to go and do that very soon. Take care. See you all next time. Thank you, Richard.